sister Fiona Armstrong. Fiona, have you fished here before?
I have never fished in Wales before, which is strange because I do have a Welsh connection in my family, but it's really exciting to be here today.
Well, I can tell you, whatever we catch or don't catch today, there's no disappointment because the scenery will more than make up for everything. Oh, and the river? It's the Glaslyn. The River Glaslyn rises in the magnificent Snowdonia National Park. This is a place of history and legend, of King Arthur and Excalibur, as well as the last known refuge of Owain Glyndŵr, who came into this landscape never to be seen again. These mountains have become almost a symbol of Wales, bearing silent witness to its endurance and survival. But today, it's tourists from all over the world who come to marvel at this dramatic mountain stronghold. Scooped out of the rock in the shadow of Mount Snowdon is Llyn Glaslyn. It empties into Llyn Llydaw below, and the two lakes form the main source of the River Glaslyn. To find out more about the river and the mountains that surround it, I'm off to meet up again with geologist John Davis.
For a geologist, it's perfect because you can see all the layers of rock which were originally laid down flat on the sea floor and then tipped up as the continents collided and produced these huge folds, and they're big folds. I mean, the whole of the Snowdon syncline is several miles across. We're looking at volcanic rocks. And these rocks were actually ashes, and they were incandescent lavas that actually glowed in the light as they flowed in avalanches down the side of volcanic islands. The river was actually formed relatively recently on this old landscape. We don't exactly know when the river was formed, but it was formed something like, say, 50 million years ago, which is a pinprick compared with the age of the rocks. And then, of course, the river flows down from Glaslyn through Llyn Llydaw, and then once you reach the valley floor, you're almost at base level, and there's very little drop.
So that's why it makes this marked transition from being a nice rocky little river to being a very slow-moving, placid river.
Yes, it had reached the level of the sea, so there was nowhere else to flow down, and it gradually started to meander.
The other thing I think is so fascinating about the Glaslyn is how it's given birth to all these old legends about the red dragon and the white dragon, and really the birth of Wales as a nation.
Well, that's right.
Isn't that what it's all about?
Well, between the two lakes here and further down at Llyndinas, of course, there is a rocky knoll, and it's of volcanic origin. And of course, it was ideal as a defensive place. And the story is, of course, that an attempt was made to build a castle on top of it. And every night, the workmen went home, and the following morning they came back and the walls were flat. And they didn't know why this was. And the king asked his specialists, why was this? And they said, well, ask Merlin. So they went and they found Merlin, and Merlin said, I can tell you exactly what the problem is. He said, there are two dragons, he said, that if you dig down in the centre of the castle, you'll find a pool. And he said, every night they emerge from the pool and they fight each other. And he said, the white dragon represents the Saxon people who come from Germany and settled in this island. And he said, the red dragon represents the old Romano-British Celts. And he said, the white dragon will always prevail. And he said, eventually, just before the day of doom, the red dragon will rise and defeat the white one.
As the river flows through the national park, this should mean that the river is protected along with the surrounding countryside. A perfect environmental balance, you'd think. But there is a threat to this delicate balance. And ironically, it is the sheer number of people who want to visit this beautiful area. Last year alone, over 12 million feet walked across the landscape.
You've got hundreds of thousands of people using these footpaths, and there are very, very serious erosion scars. In some places, the footpath can be 30, 40, or even 50 yards wide. And of course, it's the people who started off just in the sheer numbers of walkers, but then it's the high rainfall which causes the problems. Once the water gets onto the footpath, then it'll rut away the path, and it becomes a sort of almost unstoppable natural process then.
The strange thing is that if there is a path there, people will inevitably want to walk around it. I mean, that's a problem, isn't it?
If they do that, it's a sign that we've got it wrong. The whole purpose of the work is that you provide a path that people will follow. So in the old days, we used to put these huge big steps in, and of course people just didn't want to follow them, they'd go around. Now the people who build these footpaths here build them using stones put at different levels to mirror the way that people walk naturally up the hill. And people do follow them now, and it's successful.
There's such a thing as National Trust path psychology.
Well, yeah, yes, indeed. There are things like the fact that you shouldn't take anything up the hill with you other than the skills and the tools to do the job. In the old days, we used to carry up plastic pipes or concrete pipes, and they just didn't work. The best techniques are the age-old ones of the people who built the drovers' roads or the miners' tracks, and it's those skills that we're rediscovering to provide footpaths that will last for centuries more. One of the biggest problems we have here is rhododendrons. Rhododendron has a toxin in its leaves and in its roots which stops other plants competing with it. And it casts the deepest shade of all plants, so that it's virtually impossible for anything to compete against that. And nobody's ever shown a rhododendron dying of old age. Where it grows in Turkey, in its native area, there are 500-year-old rhododendrons. So you can imagine that these hillsides could become totally obscured by a monotonous blanket of rhododendrons.
Do you have to dig them all up?
We cut them, then the stumps grow back very, very quickly, and you spray them, and then you start to see the signs of the ground recovering. Heather shoots, tree seedlings will eventually come back and recolonise the areas that were destroyed by rhododendrons.
The full effect of the problem is best seen in late spring, when the hills are covered with purple blooms. Do you foresee a time in the future when perhaps people will need a licence to walk in the same sense they need a licence to fish the Glaslyn?
Well, I very, very much hope not. The whole purpose, really, of the Trust is free access to a beautiful countryside like this, so I hope that that would never happen.
Downstream from Hafod Allan farm is Llyn Dinas, and for one man this beautiful landscape is home, however small. Living in his small caravan for 6 months of the year is 85-year-old Richard Williams, a man who still goes fishing every day, whatever the weather. You're a very keen fisherman, aren't you?
That's right. I've been fishing all my life. Yes, yes. I fish for salmon, for the big ones.
What do you do with them all? Barbecue them or put them in the deep freeze?
I put them in the deep freeze, but there aren't enough to go around now. I give my family a piece of salmon occasionally, yes.
Well, many people would say you're very brave and hardy to be doing this at the age of, should I whisper it, 85?
Well, I'm a countryman, so I don't like to look at bricks and mortar.
You were postmaster in Beddgelert, weren't you?
That's right. My father was the postmaster before me, and then after the war, I took over.
You must have got to know everybody in the community, I should think.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You must have had some good stories about some of them too.
Yes. I love it when it's raining. I don't like dry weather because the lake gets too low, the fish don't run up from the estuary.
Well, the chap who owns this land, who lives down south in Cardiff, must be very glad you're here to look after it for him.
Yes, people will light fires and campfires and camping, and they leave all a lot of rubbish. So I keep a bit of order here, yes.
What is so special then about this particular spot for you?
Well, I don't know. There's nowhere like this one. It's a bit of paradise.
From Llyndinas, the Glaslyn flows between the ancient stronghold of Castell Dinas Emrys and the remains of the Sigean copper mine, which dates back to the Roman occupation. A few miles downstream, the Glaslyn meets one of its tributaries, the Colwyn, and turns south to the sea. Where the rivers meet stands the village of Beddgelert, a popular tourist attraction famous for its legend of Gelert the dog.
Oh, it's a lovely story, yes, and it brings a tear to the eye to anybody who hears it. And we have a plaque with the story on it, which is the grave of Gelert, just beyond the church in the fields. The story is that Prince Llewellyn, who we believe had Tyasaf just over there, which was a hunting lodge, and he had this faithful hound called Gelert, and Gelert would always go with him whenever he went out hunting. And on this particular occasion, the prince got ready to go hunting, and Gelert wasn't anywhere to be found. And he went and left his baby in a crib in the lodge, eventually left without Gelert. And when he came back from hunting, Gelert bounded up and met him, covered in blood. And the prince looked at the crib, and that was covered in blood, and he assumed that Gelert had killed the baby. And in his grief, he stabbed his dog with his sword, only to hear a minute later cries, and under the crib was the baby, quite safe, and next to the baby was a dead wolf. And clearly Gelert had actually saved the baby from the wolf.
But when visitors ask you about the story of Gelert and how he saved the baby prince, do you tell them it's actually not true, or it's just a good story, so it's worth repeating?
We try and we tell them the story, and it depends. Some of them are very quizzical, obviously, and want to know, all right, okay, now the real one, please. But there is a lot of history attached to the village, and even if the story of Gelert maybe is a sort of a tall story, shall we say, it's quite cleverly woven into fact, because Tyasaf, that's the oldest building in the village, that was thought to be Prince Llewellyn's hunting lodge, because it does date from the 15th century. And so we do know he had a hunting lodge up here. So there might be a bit of truth in this lovely little story.
But on a happier note, you've also got a strong connection with a very cuddly bear who wore check trousers and a red scarf.
Oh yes, good old Rupert Bear, yes. He's the connection with that actually is Alfred Bestor, and although I don't think he was the person who thought up Rupert Bear, he certainly was the illustrator and the story writer. And if you read the books, you'll see lots of the stories are based around Bethgelert. Nutwood is just over in the trees over there, and that's all about Rupert Bear. And of course, Sir Paul McCartney wrote the Frog's Chorus, and he used to come actually stay at Glaslyn, and he came to the village and he met up with Alfred Bestor, and I think that's how the Frog's Chorus came about.
The story of Gelert is probably as much a work of fiction as Rupert Bear and his furry pals, but the legend lives on in the village named after the dog. Moving south from Bethgelert, the river flows through the steep-sided Glaslyn Pass. With its wild and rugged beauty, the pass has been admired by artists for hundreds of years. And within living memory, people came here to watch hundreds of salmon leap upriver to spawn. These days, the river is under the watchful eye of the National Trust. But sadly, numbers have dramatically declined as fewer and fewer salmon are returning to the river. As the Glaslyn leaves the pass, the landscape opens up into a flat plain. This meandering section, close to the busy Bethgelert Road, looks perfect for testing the waters with my guest today, Fiona Armstrong. And I've enlisted the guidance of two local enthusiasts, Dan Hughes and Enid Roberts. Enid, have you fished the river very much? Do you know the Glaslyn well?
Well, I fished it quite a bit from here down to the Cobb. Yes, I fish it about 2 or 3 times a week.
Fiona and I are going to have a go at fishing this today. She's the expert, obviously. I'm a beginner. But what flies would you advise us to try today?
Teal prawn silver, mallet and clarets, Kate McLaren.
Enid fishes with the Welsh ladies fly fishing team,
Yes,
don't you?
yes.
So she is as near to an expert as you can get. And Dan has fished this river for how many years?
Well, yes.
How many? 30 odd?
He's not giving it away.
Possibly. Possibly, yes.
So that's pretty
Odd
expert.
enough.
I've been fishing, I think, about 12 years. So that's very small in the fishing calendar.
Are we going to fish on some good pools today?
Well, this is a good stretch of water to fish, but we fish mainly at night.
So that's when you've got a better chance of catching the sea trout.
Yes.
I think what
Yes,
Enid's
they
trying to
try.
say is we haven't got much chance today because it's very bright, which is lovely. It's a gorgeous
I just
day.
had a nice splash.
But, and you know, you're most likely to catch sea trout at night, but we can try. And luck is what you always wait for in fishing, isn't it? There's a lot of luck. There's a little bit of skill and a lot of luck.
All right then, well, good luck.
Yeah, okay.
Have fun. Have fun.
Okay.
It's not that easy, is it, the reeds and everything? I lived in Africa for most of my childhood, and then I lived in various cities. Went to university in London, worked in Manchester, other big cities. And it was only when I went to work at Border TV about 17 years ago that I actually began to see rivers and men out in strange things swathed in rubber on these rivers. And then I started thinking, what are they doing? And of course it was fly fishing.
Yeah.
What made you start fishing in the beginning? Because it's still known as very much a bit of a boys' sport. I mean, girls generally don't.
No, they
fish.
don't. I think it's only 10% of anglers are female. We certainly are in the minority. But it was actually my husband who'd asked me to marry him. I'd known him about 6 weeks. And then he sort of said, as an afterthought, by the way, there's something I must tell you. I've got to tell you something. I thought, well, what's he going to confess, you know? He said, well, actually, I love fishing and I spend a lot of time fishing. So if you don't want to be left at home, perhaps you should learn and come along. And I was so relieved. You know, if he'd said I love football and I love going to football matches, I don't think I could have worked up the same enthusiasm. Never let your other half teach you to fish, because it is a recipe for disaster. I mean, you wouldn't let him teach you to drive, would you? I mean, that's a recipe for disaster too. And fishing is just as bad, because you fall out, as we did. And we nearly didn't get married because of the great fallings out. And then, of course, I started to catch fish, and he didn't. And that is even worse, you know.
At the right work for you, that's the main thing. It's not actual brute force. Putting your line down on the water, lifting, pause, and putting it down again.
There is such a thing as beginner's luck, and that is what I had, and what most people have when they start fishing. And what happens is that when you become a competent fisher, you're casting quite well, and you're doing everything routinely, and nothing is different because, you know, your casts are routine, etc. But as a beginner, you're sort of hurling the line in, you're plonking it in, and what you're actually doing is, the fish are thinking, well, that's a bit strange, and often tempts them into biting. So you see, as a beginner, you have a very good chance of catching a fish. So I think you should go back, put your line in the water, and try again. Lila, go up on the tree, Dan. Already.
Cast out, see if you can get see how much movement there is.
Oh no, I've done it now.
And another one.
Ah. I'm concentrating not getting in that tree at the moment. Like that.
You've got the tree again, Fiona.
I know.
I just keep getting myself tangled up.
See if I've got a fly.
It's more frustrating at night, Fiona.
I would imagine so. But I stopped night fishing after I came back through a field one night carrying a salmon rod.
Yes.
And I fell over this thing, and it just stood up and went, whoa! It was a cow. Have you ever fallen in?
Yes, thank you.
Does your husband fish as well?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't.
No, he shoots.
There are some amazing things I've done in my life. I mean, I've, interviewed sort of prime ministers and princes, and I've been up in hot air balloons, and I've, done sort of dangerous water sports, but nothing compares to the excitement of catching your first fish. I'm telling you, absolutely nothing.
No, that's very much. I'd rather not lose the fly if I could. Well, I'm comforted to hear you say that it's not that easy today when it's freezing.
I've forgotten about the
I'll
tree.
climb the tree. I'll climb the tree.
The aim is to get a fish, but if you don't get a fish, which happens most of the time, that doesn't matter. Really, the aim is just to be there outside and just enjoy it.
I'll get this out for you now, without.
Well, who cares about the fish? We're having fun anyway. 200 years ago, the place where I was fishing was an estuary, and the small hills on the flat plain were islands. The land was reclaimed from the sea after the Glaslyn estuary was effectively dammed by the building of the famous Cobb here in 1811. The builder was William Maddox, who was to give his name to the town of Porthmadog. For a while, during the 19th and early 20th century, the port became virtually the centre of the world slate trade, exporting slate from the nearby quarries of Blaenau Festiniog, and here it found itself in fierce competition with the Bethesda quarries near Bangor.
In 1842, there was a great fire in the city of Hamburg, and it became known that a deputation was coming over to Bangor with the intention of buying top-quality Bethesda slate. Nathan Matthews, who had a lease on this wharf we're standing on now, heard about this. He went down to London And he found out which hotel this deputation was staying at and persuaded them to buy best quality Blaenau Ffestiniog slate. And this led up to a great friendship between the businessmen of Porthmadog, the ship owners, the captains, and businessmen in Hamburg, to such an extent that a large number of Porthmadog ships were named after the daughters and wives of German businessmen.
So a real German connection here.
There was, yes, at that time.
The Ffestiniog Railway that crosses the Cobb was opened in 1836. And 30 years later, as well as carrying slate, it began to carry passengers, making it the oldest narrow-gauge passenger railway in the country. After the First World War, the slate industry gradually declined, resulting in the eventual closure of the railway. But with the help of local enthusiasts, it reopened in the 1950s and has since become the most successful of all the great little trains of North Wales.
My mum and dad met here as well.
Did they? How romantic.
I know.
They're beautiful, beautiful looking trains.
They're lovely, aren't they? Yes. And gorgeous setting as well. Perfect, yes. What more do you want?
Absolutely. No. So you're going to carry on doing this after your 2 weeks?
Oh yes, I can, like every summer and in my holidays and stuff when I can. I might be staying for an extra week yet, but my mum doesn't know that yet.
Platform for 1600 service for Blaenau Ffestiniog. Calling after for Berlin and Taro.
There's one last story about this beautiful landscape worth recounting. Local legend has it that in the year 1170, long before Christopher Columbus, a Welsh prince, Madoc ap Owain Gwynedd, left the islands of Ynys Fadog here and set sail with 13 ships and 300 men to discover a country west of Ireland. Many claim he did just that, and that it was therefore a Welshman who first discovered America. It's a nice thought to finish the programme, to think that a Welsh prince sailed across the Atlantic from here 800 years ago and almost 400 years before Christopher Columbus. We'll never know for sure whether he made it or not, as he and his followers were never seen again. But in the 17th century, tales began to be told of an American tribe of Indians with white skin whose language was very similar to Welsh and who used coracles. Perhaps it's all a myth. And then again, perhaps not. Next week I'll be travelling south to one of Wales's best-known rivers, the Usk.